I felt my stomach drop the moment the photographer zoomed in on her eyes and said, "You need to see this." In every family photo that day, my sister was glowing. Perfect smile, perfect pose. Head tilted just enough to look soft and sweet. It was her engagement party, and she looked like the happiest woman alive. Everyone said so. The guests, our relatives, even me. I hugged her and whispered how proud I was. But when the photographer handed me his camera in the quiet corner of the hall, the story changed. "Look at her eyes," he said. At first, I didn't understand. In the group photo, she stood beside her fiancé, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She was smiling at the camera. But her eyes, they weren't looking at the lens. They were slightly to the left. The photographer swiped to the next photo. Same thing, different pose, different smile. Her eyes were fixed on something else. Then he zoomed out and showed me what was standing to the left of the camera in almost every shot: my husband. In every single photo where she was smiling at the camera, her eyes were locked on him. I laughed at first. It felt ridiculous. "You're overthinking," I told him. But he didn't laugh. "I shoot weddings every week," he said quietly. "I know when someone's eyes are following a person." My chest tightened. I didn't want to believe it. My sister adored me. She cried at my wedding. She called my husband, "Bye," like he was her own brother. This had to be coincidence. But that night I couldn't sleep. I opened the digital album he had sent me and went through every photo slowly. Zooming in. Studying. In candid shots, while everyone was laughing, she wasn't looking at. She wasn't even looking at me. She was watching my husband. And the worst part. In 2 of the photos, he was looking back. Not smiling. Not laughing. Just looking. The next few weeks were silent torture. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't accuse. I observed. I started noticing small things I had ignored before. The way she would text him about random things. The way he suddenly cared a lot about attending her wedding planning meetings. The way their conversations would stop when I entered the room. Every time I felt anger rise, I swallowed it. I needed certainty, not suspicion. So I did something simple. I invited my sister over one afternoon when my husband was at work. I casually brought up her engagement photos. I laughed about how beautiful she looked. Then I showed her one of the zoomed-in pictures. "Funny thing," I said lightly. "The photographer said your eyes were always looking somewhere else." Her smile froze. I zoomed in slowly, right in front of her. Her eyes flicked to the left of the frame, where my husband had been standing. She didn't speak. "You were looking at him," I said softly. She immediately shook her head. "No, I wasn't. You're imagining things." I didn't argue. I just watched her face. The color drained. Her hands trembled slightly. That was enough for me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't expose her. Not yet. Instead, I waited. 2 weeks later, I told my husband I was going to visit my parents for 3 days. I packed a small bag and left the house. But I didn't go to my parents. I booked a room in a nearby hotel. On the second night, I drove back home around. The lights were on. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I opened the door quietly. There she was, sitting on my couch. Laughing, with my husband. They jumped when they saw me. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. I didn't yell. I simply looked at her and said, "So that's what your eyes were on." She burst into tears immediately. My husband tried to explain. Said it wasn't what I thought. Said they never meant to hurt me. Said it just happened. But here's what hurt the most. They didn't deny it. They didn't say nothing happened. They just said they were confused. I stood there, feeling something inside me die very quietly. But even then, I didn't explode. Instead, I nodded. And I walked away. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to. I asked him to meet me privately. I showed him the photos. I told him what I saw the night before. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I just gave him the truth. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse me of lying. He just stared at the pictures for a long time. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me." The second call was to a lawyer. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted revenge that changed everything. Within a month, I had filed for divorce. Calmly, quietly. My husband was shocked. He thought I would forgive him. He thought tears and apologies would fix it. They didn't. Called off the engagement. My sister's perfect wedding plans collapsed overnight. Relatives started asking questions. I didn't spread rumors. I didn't expose details. I just refused to lie for them. When people asked why things ended, I simply said, "Ask them." And that was enough. Their secret became their burden. Months later, I ran into my sister at a family gathering. Her smile wasn't as bright anymore. She couldn't meet my eyes. The same eyes that once betrayed me in photographs. I realized something that day. The photographer didn't ruin my life. He saved it. Because while everyone else saw her smile, I saw the truth in her eyes. And instead of fighting dirty, I let the truth destroy them on its own. That was my revenge. Quiet. Clean. I didn't cry when I saw her sitting on my couch that night. I felt something colder than tears. After I walked out of that house, they thought the storm had passed because I didn't scream. They mistook my silence for weakness. That was their biggest mistake. For weeks, I moved like nothing had happened. I went to work. I answered calls. I attended family dinners. I smiled when people talked about my sister's upcoming wedding, even though I knew it would never happen. At home, my husband tried everything. Flowers. Promises that it was just emotional. That it never crossed a line. He swore he loved me. He said she meant nothing. But I remembered those photos. Her eyes didn't look confused. They looked hungry. And he had looked back. One evening, he sat across from me at the dining table and said, "Why are you so calm? Aren't you going to fight for us?" I looked at him and realized something. He expected drama. He expected me to compete with my own sister. He expected me to beg. Instead, I said quietly, "I don't compete for what's already mine." That sentence unsettled him more than shouting ever could. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. When he saw them, his confidence cracked. He started blaming her, saying she initiated it, saying she chased him, saying he was weak. I didn't defend her. I didn't defend him either. I just listened. Because I wanted him to hear himself. Meanwhile, my sister tried to fix the damage. She came to my parents' house one afternoon while I was there. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She grabbed my hands and said, "I made a mistake. I was lonely. I felt ignored. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I gently pulled my hands away. "You didn't mean for me to find out," I said. That silenced her. She kept repeating that nothing physical happened. That it was just messages. That they were confused. But I didn't care about the details anymore. Betrayal doesn't start in a bedroom. It starts in the eyes. Word spread slowly, like smoke under a closed door. Didn't tell everyone the reason he ended the engagement, but he didn't protect her either. When relatives asked him privately, he didn't lie. My sister's image began to crack. The sweet, glowing bride-to-be, the perfect daughter. And the strange thing, I never attacked her reputation. I just stopped protecting it. At family gatherings, when someone would ask, "What really happened?" I would look at her, not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly, and say, "It's her story to tell." She never did. My husband tried one last time before signing the final divorce papers. He said, "You're throwing away years over a misunderstanding." I leaned back and asked him something simple. "If I hadn't come home that night, would you have told me?" He didn't answer. That was my answer. When the divorce was finalized, I felt lighter, not happy, not triumphant. Just free. They, on the other hand, weren't. Without secrecy, whatever spark they thought they had burned out fast. Once the excitement of hiding disappeared, they were left with the reality of what they had destroyed. Trust. Family. Reputation. I heard through relatives that they tried to figure things out. Tried to see if there was something real between them. There wasn't. Because what they shared wasn't love. It was attention. And attention fades quickly when it costs you everything. Months later, I focused on rebuilding myself. I changed my hair, rearranged my apartment, took a short trip alone. For the first time in years, I started asking myself what I wanted instead of what everyone expected from me. One evening, while clearing old files from my laptop, I opened the engagement photos again. I stared at the one where her smile looked the brightest. Then I zoomed in. Her eyes were fixed to the side. But this time, I noticed something else. My expression. I was standing in the background of that photo, slightly blurred. I was smiling at her. Proud, loving, completely unaware. For a second, it hurt. Then I realized something powerful. The only person in that frame who was genuine was me. She was pretending. He was distracted. But I was real, and that realization healed something deep inside me. A year later, at another family event, she approached me carefully. There was no glow around her anymore. No audience admiring her, just silence. "I miss my sister," she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. "I miss her too," I replied. Because the sister I loved would have never looked at my husband that way. The photographer once messaged me to ask how everything turned out. I simply told him, "Your camera saw what I couldn't." Sometimes the truth doesn't shout. Sometimes it hides in tiny details, like the direction of someone's eyes. She smiled in every photo that day, but her eyes told the truth. And instead of fighting loudly, I let that truth unfold quietly, patiently, and completely. They thought they were stealing something from me. In the end, they only exposed themselves. And I walked away with my dignity intact. While they were left explaining why their smiles never reached their eyes day, I stopped reacting was the day they started panicking. After the divorce was finalized, people expected me to break, to post sad quotes, to disappear from gatherings, to avoid eye contact. Instead, I did the opposite. I showed up, calm, polite, unbothered. And that unsettled everyone, especially them. My ex-husband tried calling a few times in the first months. Not to fix things. Not really. Just to check if I was okay. I could hear it in his voice. He wanted to know if I was miserable. I wasn't. I'm good, I told him once. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said quietly, "You moved on fast." I almost laughed. Moving on doesn't start after divorce papers. It starts the moment respect dies. Meanwhile, my sister's world was shrinking. Invitations became fewer. Conversations became shorter. She was no longer the glowing bride-to-be. She was the girl whose engagement collapsed mysteriously. And mystery makes people curious. One evening at a cousin's wedding, I saw it clearly. She walked in wearing a beautiful outfit, makeup flawless, smile carefully practiced. But when she looked around the hall, people didn't rush to her like before. The warmth had cooled. Not because I exposed her, because she knew I could. That quiet power changed everything. She avoided standing near me in photos that night. Irony, right? The girl who once couldn't stop looking at what wasn't hers now couldn't even look at me. At one point, an auntie came up to me and whispered, "Betta, what really happened with her engagement?" I took a sip of my drink and said calmly, "Sometimes what looks perfect in pictures isn't real." That was all. The auntie nodded slowly. Truth doesn't need details to be understood. Months passed. I focused on work, on rebuilding my savings, on rediscovering myself. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I started choosing peace over pressure. And something strange happened. People respected me more. Not because I was loud, but because I was steady. One afternoon, my sister showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked thin or tired. "I lost him too," she said quietly. I knew she meant my ex-husband. So they had tried. Of course they did. Forbidden attention feels exciting, until it becomes ordinary. He said it wasn't worth ruining everything. She continued, her voice cracking. He said we made a mistake. I looked at her carefully. "Ed, what did you say?" I asked. She swallowed. I said I thought he cared. That almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the photos. The secret glances. The laughter in my living room. "I hope it was worth it," I said softly. She started crying again, saying she never meant to hurt me, that she didn't know why she was drawn to him, that she felt invisible in her own life. And for the first time, I understood something important. It was never about him. It was about her wanting what I had. My stability. My marriage. My attention. My spotlight. And when she reached for it, she burned everything including herself. "I don't hate you," I told her honestly. And that confused her more than anger ever could. "I just don't trust you." That sentence built a wall she couldn't climb. Forgiveness is private. Trust is earned. And she had lost both. A year later, I ran into my ex-husband at a mall. He looked older. Not physically, just heavier. Regret has weight. He tried small talk. Asked about work. Asked about my family. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I thought you'd fight harder." There it was again. That expectation. Dramas. Competition. I smiled calmly. I don't fight for people who forget my value. He didn't have a response for that either. As I walked away, I felt something settle inside me completely. Closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with clarity. Now when I look back at those engagement photos, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Because in a room full of decorations, guests, laughter, and fake perfection, a camera caught the truth. Her smile was for the world. Her eyes were for my husband. And my silence was for myself. They thought their secret glances were harmless. But those tiny shifts in her eyes exposed everything. I didn't need revenge that destroyed loudly. I chose the kind that lets people live with what they did. They lost trust. They lost love. They lost the image they worked so hard to protect. And I lost two people who were never truly on my side. That's not a tragedy. That's clarity. She smiled in every photo that day. But I was the one who learned to see clearly. And once you see the truth in someone's eyes, You never it. I thought the story was over, until the day she asked me to take a photo with her again. It was our cousin's baby shower. Balloons, laughter, music playing softly in the background. I almost didn't go, but I refused to let discomfort exile me from my own family. She was already there when I arrived. We locked eyes for a second. Not the old kind of eye contact, not secretive, not guilty, just distant. Later in the evening, someone shouted, "Sisters, come stand together for a picture." The room went quiet for a second. Everyone knew. No one said it, but everyone knew. She hesitated. So did I. Then I walked forward. We stood side by side, just like we had 100 times before. The photographer adjusted the camera and said, "Smile." She smiled. So did I. But this time I didn't look at the lens. I looked straight ahead. And for the first time in years, I didn't wonder where her eyes were. Because it didn't matter anymore. After the picture, she pulled me aside. "Do you ever miss before?" she asked carefully. I knew what she meant. Before the photos. Before the couch. Before the silence. Sometimes, I admitted. That surprised her. "But I don't miss who you became," I added gently. Her face tightened, but she nodded. She couldn't argue with that. You see, revenge isn't always about making someone suffer loudly. Sometimes it's about becoming untouchable. I didn't gossip. I didn't humiliate her publicly. I didn't try to win people to my side. I just became unavailable. Unavailable for manipulation. Unavailable for guilt. Unavailable for drama. And that did more damage than any outburst ever could. Over time, relatives stopped tiptoeing around me. They realized I wasn't bitter. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't broken. I was simply done. And that stability shifted the entire narrative. Instead of being the woman whose husband betrayed her, I became the woman who walked away without losing herself. That reputation matters. One evening, my mother quietly told me something that stayed with me. "She cries at night sometimes," she said about my sister. "She says she wishes she could go back." I listened without reacting. We all wish we could go back to moments before we crossed certain lines. But wanting to rewind doesn't erase what you chose. A few months later, I heard my ex-husband was engaged again. The news didn't sting the way people expected it to. It felt distant, like hearing about an old neighbor. What hurt once had healed into indifference. And indifference is powerful, because love can turn into anger. But anger still cares. Indifference means you're free. The last time I saw him was at a family wedding. He kept his distance. I noticed something subtle, though. When someone raised a camera, he looked straight at the lens, carefully, almost cautiously. As if he had learned that eyes can betray you. I almost smiled at that thought. Life moved on. I built new routines, new friendships, new peace. Slowly I started trusting again, not blindly, not naively, but wisely. And every once in a while, I would think back to that moment when the photographer zoomed in and changed everything. Such a small detail. Just a shift in direction. But it revealed an entire truth. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely hides perfectly. It leaks through the eyes, through pauses, through glances that last a second too long. She thought no one would notice. She thought a perfect smile could cover wandering attention. She was wrong. The camera noticed, I noticed. And instead of exploding, I observed. Instead of accusing, I waited. Instead of destroying, I detached. That was my revenge, not screaming. Not fighting. Not begging. Just stepping back and letting their own choices unravel them. Today, when we stand in family photos, there's space between us. Not dramatic space. Just enough. And that space says everything that doesn't need to be spoken. She once smiled in every picture, while her eyes searched for what wasn't hers. Now when she smiles, she looks straight at the camera. Careful. Aware. Maybe even afraid. But I don't check anymore. Because I don't need proof. The proof already set me free. And the most satisfying part. I didn't lose myself trying to teach them a lesson. They learned it on their own. Every time they look back at those old photos,